All right, good afternoon, everyone, or morning. It is 11:03, and we're going to call the regular Electric Utility Board meeting for October 18th, 2022 to order.
All right, this time we will call the city council meeting to order. We're moving into executive session. Nope. There's no quorum.
Never mind.
Okay. Is anyone else coming? Maybe? If so, yeah, just wave and we'll stop and be rock and rolling. We're now recessing into executive session. Sorry, is there anyone signed up for public comment? Nope. Okay. We are now recessing into executive session in accordance with VTCA Government Code 551.086 on competitive matters of Lubbock Power and Light and VTCA Government Code 551.071 seeking advice of and consultation with LP&L's attorneys on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with Chapter 551 of the Government Code and seeking advice of its attorneys about pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. We are now in exec, and we're going to be on the second floor? Second floor. All right. It is 12:05, and we're going to reconvene into open session, which brings us to item 5, approve the minutes of the regular Electric Utility Board meeting on September 20th, 2022, and the special Electric Utility Board meeting on October 4th, 2022. Have a motion by Mr. Schultz. And a second by Mrs. Henry. All those in favor do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same. That carries. Item 6, presentation discussion, update report by the Director of Utilities or his designee. Mr. Ivy.
I am that designee. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. Mr. Chairman, just a point of order. We've got some presentations a little bit out of order. So on item number 9, Mr. Luke is going to be talking about what the issues that are on actually 11 and 12. It's all folded into that one presentation on item 9. Okay, we just pulled it forward. So, and then you guys can crack the whip and make us get done faster. I would like to say thank you all for your participation in the strategic retreat. Gwen, sorry we couldn't have you there. We missed you, but I think we had a really good retreat. We appreciate all the good feedback. We're not going to talk about the strategy today because we still need to try to formulate what we heard, what we were taking out of that, and then we're going to retool this in a little bit different format and bring it back to you all, sort of the so what piece of it. What are we going to do? What are we going to take with the information that we've received and do something with it that you all can then hold us accountable for, right? So that'll be probably a presentation in November, just so you look forward to that. Beyond that, we've got some good presentations for you today. If you got any questions on any of the metrics or anything we got in the board packet, we're happy to talk about that as well at this time.
Questions for Mr. Ivy?
Or staff.
Or staff.
Preferably.
Just Mr. Ivy.
All right then. Well, with no further ado then, let's jump into item number 8. We've talked a little bit about the fact that we're entering into the ERCOT retail market as a municipal-owned utility, kind of a wires company, right? That's going to be our part of the business. Well, what goes along with that is we also have a generation arm. When you go into the ERCOT market, the retail market, you're expected to figure out what you're going to look like when you show up there. And what we've decided is that we're going to be an unbundled wires company participating in the market to facilitate the transfer of energy between the providers and the customers. That means that we're not really going to be in the generation business anymore. That means we're not going to be in the what they call load serving entity, retail electric provider. We're not going to be in any of those. We're just going to be the wires company piece of it. I wasn't really satisfied with that being the answer to not be in the generation business anymore, because there's potential opportunity in ERCOT to be able to generate and sell that power and maybe make some money on behalf of the city. But we didn't really have anything formally written down for why that was going to be that way, that we would not be in the generation business. So I asked Harvey and Blair to take the summertime to come up with the basis for why we were making the decision in that manner. And they've concluded their review, and I thought it would be helpful if you all heard them speak to what it is that we're looking at and why we came to that kind of a decision. But kudos to them for doing a great job of running through that, and look forward to the questions that you all might have related to that. Okay? Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into it. So since May of 2021, our generation assets have been really used as merchant assets, which means those assets are no longer being used to meet our own system native load for our customers. They're being used for purely economic reasons and for system benefit issues. And as they do that, we're looking at a criteria of how we wanted to assess this. We want to look at what financial benefit does it bring to the utility, what system reliability benefits does it have, and ultimately, what does it fit into the strategic direction of LP&L as we go past a retail market setting. And the criteria that underneath of that is to say, for each of those benefits, are they affordable, are they dependable, and are they sustainable? So as we walk through that, I'll just walk through the first on the financial benefit, just looking at, as we know, we ran through basically for the last 3 years, as we've economically dispatched those units, and economically dispatched, what we mean is the cost of the fuel and the O&M to run that unit is less than what the market is. So when it's less than what the market is, you're going to be in a profitable situation. 80% of that time, it happens between the months of May and August of every year. So you have this time when prices are high that you can economically dispatch these units and you get a lot of financial benefit during that time. That opportunity is rather narrow and doesn't cover the fact that you have to maintain that unit for the bulk of for all year long. Part of it is, and the other thing that is a factor that is kind of a little bit beyond the range of control, and that's going to be the cost of insurance. So as we looked at the economic dispatch opportunities, we looked at it as just over the course of time, it just can't, it basically runs about $5.6 million to a loss every year when you factor in how much you pulled in versus how much you're paying in fuel and insurance and an O&M. We ran a net present value of that, and I discounted it kind of heavy at a 10%, and we're at a negative NPV of about $20.9 million over 5 years. So it's running significantly to the financial detriment. As I was starting to say, one of the major contributors to kind of weighing down those units or against those units is the cost of insurance. So 2 years ago, that insurance was $1.2 million for those generation assets. That's now $3.3 million. A bulk of that issue is really about just the nature of generation assets in the electric utility industry for insurers, especially due to the fires caused out in the West Coast, where I'm from. We have a lot of fires out there. PG&E has had a lot of fires because of not maintaining their systems. They look at that as related to generation, and the cost has just gone up exponentially. So even without any claims in a perfect world, our insurance costs would have gone up. The fact that we've had some claims has contributed partially to that increase, but the bulk of that has to do with the fact that a lot of insurers have pulled out of the market. You don't have the liquidity for insurance for coverage for generation assets in the electric utility industry, and they just go up. So that's a major piece of it. And insurance plays about 30% of the total costs of running those units when you throw in fuel and O&M. It's significant. So that type of an increase really is weighed fairly heavily on our units, and there's really no relief in sight for that. So we've tried to do what we can do with our insurers. We've tried to mitigate things. We've tried to find pieces that we can self-insure. We've maximized that. We've got as many players on the table as we can. Matter of fact, we had an underwriter from London that also came out here last month and talked to us. So we've had a chance. We've been really working all the angles. We've got good insurers, but that's as close as we can get it. The other financial benefit that it provides us is as a financial hedge. So as we've talked about our financial hedging program that we do to procure power ahead of time, to fix our costs, one of the other hedges that are also out there are our generation units. So our generation units have an operating cost. When we turn on those units, on average, it costs us about $120 per megawatt hour to generate power from those units during the summertime. And that's with gas prices being where they are at that point. When prices during the summer exceed that number, we're able to economically dispatch it. So in essence, what they do is when our financial condition for our hedging goes above $120, we effectively have 96 megawatts of a call option at about $120. So we have protection for up to 96 megawatts of load on our side. So it provides an additional hedge. That benefit ends as soon as we've gone out of the retail market and we have nothing left to hedge. Really, that benefit goes away at the end. The third thing that I've mentioned that just in the background is we need to continue to invest capital money into these generation assets to keep them running. And for one of the units, the Brandon unit, we have about a $2 to $3 million investment that we need to make in the next 2 years. So the other thing that it's going to do, the generation units they're going to compete for capital dollars to continue going compared to our T&D system that we also need money for. So for that, we're looking at those types of financial benefits. So those are the constraints that we're running into. And with that, that's the financial side of it. And with that, I'm going to do the system reliability, and I'll hand that off to Blair.
Welcome, Blair.
Thank you. Before I start, I'd like to introduce a couple of gentlemen, Paul Coverland and Jamie Case. I'm going to simplify the process that they went through to analyze the reliability, and hopefully it'll make sense. If it doesn't, these two gentlemen would be glad to explain a very complicated process. So, but I'd like to keep it very high and very simple because of the model is not shared in public. It's not put on our system. It's not presented anywhere. So I'm going to have to verbalize what these gentlemen did. So with that, part of the process that, if you look at the slide, so part of the process is the reliability. What these two gentlemen do is they take every piece of asset that we have on our transmission and our substation system and generation system, and they put it into a model, a software model. They analyze. They put in whether it's a 2,000 or a 3,000 amp breaker. They put in what size wire it is, how much amperage it'll carry at a certain temperature. All aspects and details of those assets that carry that electricity through our system. So that's probably the first step. The second step is they simulate outages. They take and there's a couple of different, I'll give you the technical term, long lead time single contingency, LLT-P1. They did probably 5 or 6 scenarios here, and then there's a double contingency, which, you lose two transmission lines or a long lead time item and a transmission line. So they simulate outages in the model, and they look for a couple of things. 2 of them are thermal overloads, which are something that exceeds our normal ratings. If a certain transmission line has a certain rated amperage, or thermal load that, if there are more amperages flowing through that line, it'll heat up and exceed the rating of that line. So that's one of the things that they look at. The second thing is voltage issues. when the bus voltage exceeds or is lower than the normal ratings, which is 95 to 105%. And I put a couple of 69 kV, it ranges from 65 and a half to 72 and a half. 115s, 109 to 120, close to 121. So those are the voltages that they look for. And this software will alarm and indicate whether they're out of compliance or there's a contingency. They call it a contingency. So outages are simulated with generation running and not running to determine if it's a reliability benefit to the system. One of the things that they take into account is the load growth in the model. They'll do it over several different years, out 4 to 5 years on the simulation. And with that, the contingencies are developed to deal with the violations. If there's a voltage violation or thermal violation, they'll develop a contingency, which is either a capital project or another a spare part or something to that effect. So with that, I'll make one statement. It says all realistic situations that have been simulated, we are comfortable that LP&L is in a safe position to cease generation operation for reliability issues. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Stafford, I got you.
Just one question. What is our load growth? What did they use in there? Is it 1 or 2 or 3% that we're projecting that they used in the model? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome to the stage. That was quick.
Mr. Paul Coberlin.
Mr. Paul, what?
Paul Coberlin.
Paul Coberlin, welcome.
Thank you. So the load growth factor that we used in this model was based off of our system's performance over the past 10 years. And if my memory serves me correctly, it's less than 1% year on year. Did that answer your question?
Was that the load, is that the same as the load growth that we expect here in Lubbock?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Less than 1%. So what we have, we're going at about 1% a year in additional need for load. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So when we step away from this, not to bring up old Winter Storm Uri and all that good stuff, but ERCOT, everyone had the rolling outages and they were doing that and everything else. They were never, if we had have been integrated into ERCOT at that time, they wouldn't have been asking us to help produce more, correct? Or would they have?
We were actually in ERCOT. Our generation was in ERCOT
But they weren't using it.
February of 2021.
They were using it then?
We did use it,
Okay. So this would go away from that though, correct?
yes.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember and realize the amount of generation we have only represents a fraction of our load.
Right.
Right, so we're a net, what is our net, 119, 120, something like that, right, generation?
112.
112, excuse me.
We do 600 total or something?
Yeah, we're over 600 total in the summertime, so it's just a fraction of what our needs are. So, I mean, there's the notion if we get out of the generation business, we got a lights out scenario, well, we have that scenario anyway.
Okay.
So these are not going to save the day. They can offset part of it, but it's not going to get us there. So what Blair's telling you and what Paul and Jamie have modeled is that we don't need it for reliability purposes on a normal basis.
I think that's what the ratepayers want to know, is that that's not a factor in the decision.
It's going to be a money loser that won't make any sense for us to continue to run going forward, that we're going to have to ask our customers to pay for.
Okay. Ms. Stafford?
I think there's a myth out there, Joel and Blair, that we've been supplying a lot of electricity to our current customers, and that really hasn't been true since, 1982, a long, long time. Is that correct?
Actually, later than that, I think it was mid-2000s. So we made the transition to purchase the SPS assets. What was that, 2006-ish? And that just almost doubled the amount of load that we had on our system. So it added quite a bit back in that time. Right up to about 2004 is when I'm hearing the old timers. I think I'm older than any of them. When I hear them talking about it, we were able to supply up to 100% of our needs internally.
Okay, until then, until
Right.
that.
So generators started getting old. We weren't going to maintain them anymore. We weren't purchasing new ones, and then we slowly started falling away from being able to supply our needs. But it was a contest of could we buy it cheaper or could we make it ourselves cheaper? Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Correct the statement. So let me correct the statement. We did not run those units in ERCOT in February of 2021. We were still in SPP.
Okay.
But we did run in SPP.
Right, we were running them in SPP, but they weren't transmitting over to that.
Right.
Yep.
It was just a drop in the bucket compared to what our load was.
Right.
So, with the reliability topic discussed, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Harvey.
Come back, Harvey.
Thanks. So now we looked at financial, we've looked at reliability, now we'll look at strategic fit, and the question for us is, how does it fit our strategic direction of LP&L when our focus is going to be the premier provider of energy delivery services is really what we will become. And of all those services and ventures they need to provide, that we're involved with, they need to provide benefit towards that objective, and coming back to affordable, sustainable, dependable. So should LP&L continue to own and operate the generation units? The financial benefit is there is not an affordable or sustainable financial benefit to LP&L. It operates consistently on a loss basis. Its opportunity as a financial hedge to our purchase power will cease at the end of retail next year. It also competes for capital dollars that we need for our T&D system to maintain that. And that's also a way that we can minimize our debt going forward. So with that, it doesn't meet the financial criteria as a benefit. For our system benefit, our generation units are no longer needed to provide that system reliability that they had in the past, based on the studies, as Blair kind of mentioned to us, and from the studies. We can safely cease operation of the generation units from a system reliability standpoint. So with generation operations as a net loss, financial loss, and no remaining system benefit provided, continued ownership and operation of the unit is not affordable or sustainable and does not fit our long-term strategy. So with that, the staff's conclusion is after we move to a competitive retail market, we'll end the operation and look to exit the ownership of the 3 generation units at Brandon, Massengale, and Ty Cook. Our exit considerations are going to be looking at an end date of those production operations. When do we want to stop that? Do we want to, in terms of the disposal of the assets, we can sell the assets, sell the generation units, or we can decommission them. Future investment for the repair up until the end of production operations, we've got a schedule for that in terms of how much do you want to invest to keep those units going up until the end. We've done an economic benefit analysis on that. And then finally, and really importantly, and that is what's the impact on the operations and transition for staff affected by the generation unit shutdown. So I'll just quickly walk through those. And we have an end date of production operations. We would look for the last day of electric retail service for our customers as being the day that we would begin to stop and cease productively our use of our generation assets. It takes us through the summertime when we really derive pretty much any economic benefit we can. Again, that 80% of that benefit is going to occur between May and August. By the time we hit into the late fall, we really don't use the units during the wintertime. There's not as many opportunities to get economic benefit. So it'd be a logical time when you no longer have that economic benefit and when you're no longer providing hedging for purchase power, and it really is purely a merchant unit at that point. For our exit considerations for the sale or decommission of the units, we could find, for selling the units seems to be an optimal path if we can go down that path, if we can find an interested party and solicit offers in an RFP process to see who would be interested in purchasing those assets. We periodically do get some interest on what we're going to be doing with those assets after the market retail, so there is interest in the units. Affected production staff, if we did sell the units, would have an opportunity to continue working at the unit, so it provides a good opportunity for them to continue to be employed and stay in the area. If we don't find a buyer for the assets, we could decommission the units, and that would be a total taking down of the unit and restoring the area back to a pre-use condition. Some of those costs would be offset by selling parts of the units. Again, we've got a major unit that major asset that we just put into Massengale. That would be worth some money that would pay down some of that cost. Also, scrap value for the material would also pay down some of that cost. So those are things that could offset some of those decommissioning costs, but that would be our other option for how to exit those units. And as I mentioned, we have a guide for future investment in maintenance and repair of the unit. So the question comes, if something breaks down at the unit or you need to do a repair on the unit, we did a cost value analysis here that I kind of put before you that said, if we needed to make a repair at any one of the 3 units, how much money could they potentially make for the balance of the year that you would actually recover that cost? And so we set a pretty high hurdle for it. So for example, for Massengale, if we had to make an investment and we had that unit back online by January 1st, if that repair cost up to $1 million, we would economically recover all of that for the balance of the year. Once you've spent that $1 million, it really ceases to make sense at that point. And we did that same evaluation as a guide for Brandon and for Cook, knowing that economic conditions change, so that value equation can change slightly depending on market conditions, but we needed to come up with a guide that would say, how much money would it make sense to invest to keep that up and make repairs to the unit if it went down? So this was an economic consideration and this is based off of 3 years of prior market sales and economic dispatch of those units. And then finally, for the impact and transition for affected LP&L staff, we have 21 current existing production staff. The options are they could move to other parts of the company. There are other parts. We do have openings within LP&L that we need to fill some budgeted and open vacancies. They could also move with a generation unit if it was sold to another company. And then finally, for those remaining, we could look for the idea of offering a severance package for remaining staff. And with that, I'll
Mr.
turn
Fields?
to the board for questions.
I think I know the answer to this, Mr. Harvey.
Sure.
Are there any contractual obligations with maintaining these generation units?
We don't have an obligation, I think that's a great question. Blair?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
We have no system requirements for ERCOT?
No.
I was mostly certain of that, but I want to be very careful. So this is the expert.
Paul, what do you think? No.
Yes, exactly.
Other questions or comments?
Just a question, who might?
Eddie, here. Sorry, the far right button. You're good, just so it's recorded. Far right. I don't know what the blue one does.
Okay, thank you. On your generation units, if you sold it as a unit, who might be interested in that?
It might be another independent power producer, or it could be another electric utility, or a generation transmission entity. So it could be one of those who are in the SPP, are in SPP or ERCOT, actually ERCOT.
I think Felix was stepping up. Were you? Good. Nope.
Also, there could be other companies that,
Will you hit the mic so they, sorry. Going to be a dictator up here on that or I get in trouble. They can't hear it later on.
sorry about that, there could also be companies that specialize in buying the parts, keeping them in case something else for another company goes bad, and they'll hold them on site for them, stuff like that, and then they'll resell or try to auction them off themselves and all that good stuff, so there's that opportunity also.
So if someone bought them as a generation unit, who would they sell the power to?
They could sell it on the market, or they could sell it to other customers. So the advantage of these sites is that you already have environmental permits for the site to operate a gas turbine at that site, which is very valuable. You also have built-in infrastructure for transmission to for that. You also have gas pipelines to the units. All of this infrastructure is set for this. That's very, very difficult to go through an FSEC or energy facility siting study to just start a brand new plant somewhere else. So a lot of that work and the value of it is just the site itself. So there's the unit value for having the unit, whether you actually operate it or, as Felix said, that somebody could part it out, using a car term. But the value of that site is incredibly valuable, and it's very expensive to reproduce that somewhere else.
To my understanding, somewhat turnkey. If we were in the Eddie and Dan Odom generation business, we could go entwine that, the lines and everything already connected, so now they buy that, they keep up the site and do everything else and provide the electricity, and they're the ones selling it off and taking their cut that way.
Correct.
That's my understanding of it.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
And somebody might find value in that also because they could provide a significant amount of capital to invest in those units to get them up to a level that you could get much more efficient operation out of it, much more production out of it. Whereas for us, we could do that, but we would have to raise significant capital investment into those units to do that, just to participate in it. And that's what I was referring to as the competition for capital dollars. Your T&D system, which will become your core business, and your generation unit, which really becomes an adjunct piece of it off to the side that you could maybe make some money off to the side, where a pure merchant, big unit, big company could invest that capital. It would make sense for them.
Thank you.
As far as staffing goes, the 21 folks, there's 21 openings or whatever, or normal attrition or et cetera, that way throughout the company.
You're talking about placing these folks from around, okay. It's not really apples to apples in terms of what the positions are now and what the ones that are open. And so we've talked with the team out there, and they understand if they want to vie for another position somewhere else, it's going to be on an equitable basis for where they're going, not from where they're coming from. So maybe it's better, maybe it's not. It would be up to them to try to take that step. I'm not just going to place somebody in a position and then have a compression issue right off the bat with the salaries, because that just creates bad will, right? So hopefully we will offer resume training, interview training, things like that to try to help out as well. This is still a hot job market. There's not a million generating plants within a stone's throw from here, but there's a few. And so I think there's going to be opportunities, and then there are a fair amount of folks that are retirement eligible that may, take that option. At the end of the day, we're going to need a skeleton crew to stay with us for a pretty good while as we decide, do we sell it, do we raise it to the ground, what do we do with it? You're going to need somebody there to help facilitate those processes. So some amount of people, probably in the 5-person category, something like that, would be what we'd want to maintain.
Okay. Ms. Stafford?
You talked about the infrastructure, the value of that the wires are there, the transmission, the gas lines. Is that land owned by the city of Lubbock?
That's a little above my pay grade, but I believe that's a yes.
So just to fast forward, let's say somebody wanted to buy that, would they have to lease the land from the city?
I would think that we would work with Jarrett and try to get to what that best answer is. If there's a long-term future desire to hang on to the land, then certainly we would lease it.
Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, we might want to sell it.
Other questions or comments? All right, that was item 8. Where are we jumping to now?
Yes. Luke is going to, you're up next, right?
Luke?
Yeah, Luke is going to talk to us about the goings-on with the projects that we got for the remaining load transfer. Ms. Stafford asked that we kind of keep this front and center, which is a good idea. What we want to try to do is create a report that goes into your packet. We may not do a presentation every month, but at least if you can see the information, that's sort of a rundown of maybe a budget to actual or how's the project's looking. We'll see if we can get you 1 or 2, maybe a 3-pager on that.
What item is that falling under?
This is number 8.
9.
9.
All right, item 9, presentation discussion, financial capital, financing options, audits, and financial policies. Mr. Luke.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me again today. I wanted to give you an update on where we're at with the projects related to moving our remaining 30% of load. I'm going to try to keep it brief. We are on schedule, so I'm not going to really show you the schedule as it's pretty detailed anyway. But things are moving along. We're about 50% done. We're right in the middle of 2 of the construction projects for the substations, and we've kicked off the remaining 2 that are critical for this. And our feeder projects are about halfway through as well. One of the biggest concerns throughout this effort has been the procurement and getting the material that we need. And I showed this slide last time, and I know there was some concern over the lack of 100% delivered on the right-hand column over there. You can see that we've progressed quite a bit since the last presentation. The substations, as we talked about at that time, a lot of that material arrives during the construction phase of that project. So you can see Co-op and Thompson are almost fully complete. We're wrapping up the final phases of that, and I believe the last material should arrive next week, and then those will be finalized. Vicksburg and McDonald, we've actually kicked off construction for those 2 projects, and so those, you can see we've had all the POs issued for that, and that material will start coming in as the construction of those projects progresses. And then Yellow House and Northeast, they're not critical to the 23 cutover, but they are projects that we're kind of running in congruence with these. As far as the feeder projects, you can see that we have most of the material. There's still some remaining items that are yet to come in. You can see that I believe Co-op, Vicksburg, and McDonald are all in that 60% range, and the reason they're also similar is because a lot of the material that's remaining to come in is in the same package, or they're in the same PO that we issued, so they'll all arrive basically at the same time. But we are on track, and we're staying in touch with our distributors and as far back as the manufacturer as best we can to make sure we get the material in time to finish these projects. I briefly wanted to cover the financial aspect of these projects as well. We are on track. We received the remaining appropriation that we're planning to spend for these projects on October 1st, and you can see now what we've expended to date for each project and what we've encumbered. And then with what we're forecasting to spend on the remaining projects, we still have a considerable amount of open contingency left to make sure that we cover these projects for instance, some of the POs that have not been issued, and we still have some, we still don't know for sure exactly what that material cost is going to be. So I wanted to put that in front of you. As far as the total amount, we've appropriated just under $49 million. We've spent to date just over $11 million. We have hard numbers on what we're planning to spend at just over $21 million, and then we're forecasting just over $7 million after that. And we should be coming in under budget.
Ms. Stafford?
So basically, this shows the tie to the 60 million in bonds that we issued. So you've got your 49 or 50 million, 11, that's your 60 million. So that ties to that bond package.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And for everyone else, Gwen asked for this in our pre-agenda meeting item, and this will tie back to our consent items, where you're starting to see those large item ticket numbers. We pulled a couple last month. We figured this would be easier and more transparent for everyone to see where we stood and everything, so you don't see on number item 14 for almost $2 million. That is in Luke's budgeted here and everything else, so that's tracking along. The page before this is showing where his percentages to the goal of 100%, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's the explanation on that.
That's all I had. Are there any
Other
questions?
questions or comments?
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Which item are you reporting on so I can announce it, please, Casey?
I'm sorry?
Which item are we?
It's also 9.
Also
so
9,
it's just
okay,
the financial
perfect.
presentation part.
Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get started with our August financials. So as you can see, there's been a decrease to our cash of about $2 million. So I want to point your attention to our cash flows, which are right next to the balance sheet. We can see that there was a positive cash flow from our operating activity at $4.7 million. What that's telling me is that we're finally getting payments in on those higher bills from the summer months. And if you also look at our receivables, those are going back down to a more normal number. Remember, they ballooned last month, but they look a little bit more normal this month. We also had a positive cash flow in our investing activities, and that's going to be drawdown from drawdowns on bonds for July construction expenses. And then those are going to be offset by about $10 million in our financing activities, and that's going to be spending on capital projects. So we'll see a bond drawdown for August for about $11.5 million. That will be reflected in our September financials. And the majority of that is going to come from the 2022 series bonds that we issued. There is just a slight decrease in our liabilities. That's just a mixture of our accrued liabilities going up and then our purchase power costs sitting in our payables being a little bit less than July. Our ratios have stayed fairly consistent. You can see in our current ratio it did go down a little bit, and that's just going to be because we did have a decrease in our assets also that was larger than the decrease in our liabilities. So once we get that bond drawdown for August, we can expect that number to go back up to where it needs to be. Okay, moving on. So at this point, we should be about 92% of our budget. Last month, Mr. Odom asked the driver and us being over budget for our charges for services, and I told you it was our purchase power cost. I think if y'all look at the graph this month, you can see pretty much a direct relationship between those. We have our purchase and fuel and power costs coming at 103% over budget, and then our charges for services are 104%. So those are pretty much directly related to each other. In our T costs, we're coming at about 89% of budget, and then our hold harmless payment about 87% of budget. And I did forecast both of those before I came here, and we're going to meet budget on those by year end. So we're doing good there. And then for all of our other departmental expenses, we're coming in around 82% of budget. So we may come in a little lower than budget on those by year end. So we're about to move into audit. Y'all won't see September financials for a little bit. So I just wanted to leave y'all with a couple of numbers from comparing this August to last August. So since last August, our net position has increased by $15 million. For our operating income this year, we're showing about $18 million more than we had at this point last year. And then as far as our cash flows, at this time last year, we were at negative $50 million, and at this time this year, we're at negative $7 million. So even though, we had a tough summer with purchase power costs and all that, we are, managing those obstacles. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Questions? Ms. Stafford?
In terms of year-end budget, we will probably be over budget, and that's mostly due to the power supply costs.
Yes, but the charges for services should offset that. So you saw on the graph, they were pretty, so we should have an offset of that. So we should come in, pretty good. It just depends really on the departmental expenses at this point. But purchase power is raising our budget, but our charges for services matching that. You understand what I'm saying?
So in terms of just, if you set aside the purchase power and that type deal, we're running well below 82%.
Yeah, for the expenses.
And that'll probably even be through September. You don't anticipate any bleeps there?
Not that I know of. No, I don't want to. I don't want to make any promises, but not that I know of. And then, we also have our T costs helping us out, so us meeting the budget on that's going to help a lot too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Any other
y'all.
questions?
Good.
All right. Item 10,
Okay.
presentation discussion, Director of Utilities or his designee, Mr. Rose.
So a lot of this will be familiar to you because as we've done this in the past, this communications plan is the one that we've utilized for small projects and big projects like the migration of the first 70% over to ERCOT. So haven't shown this, and I kind of want to give you an update, but I'll race through this pretty quickly. As a reminder, with the communications plan, we have 3 different types of communications that we employ. You have Own, which is our website, social channels, and, for example, animated explainer videos that we've started to create and put out on the website. You have our email list, you have direct mailers, and then we've also wanted to utilize the City of Lubbock Utilities website, social channels, account portals, IVR system, billing onserts, all the things that are kind of direct contact with the customer on the CLOU side. For earned media, you have press releases and media advisories that typically create news stories and radio interviews, and then we follow those up with fact sheets and one-pagers that we have downloadable on the website, but also pass out to events that we go to. And then finally, you've got paid media, which is digital, print, and radio ads. And then we utilize social posts by putting some money behind it so that folks that don't follow us but are in this market, it still appears in their feed. So it acts as if it's an ad that you might see on a digital website for, KCBD or Everything Lubbock. Also utilizing speaking opportunities, City Council and EUB meetings, City Council district meetings. Organization meetings are really important. I've told you that I had a goal of trying to hit a community group every single week as we go forward, and so at this point, haven't quite met that, but I've talked to 8 groups over the past 10 weeks, so we're going to continue to try to do that as much as we possibly can, big and small. And then as we can, try to get in front of various different religious organizations, because that's sometimes a different crowd that might not get hit by these others, and they've got obviously a group of folks that they talk to directly. And then open houses, I'll show you in a minute where these will fit in, but looking to do open houses in the future that utilize reps that have registered in the market so that they can be there and explain to their potential customers, and then hopefully in the long run have events where folks can come during the shopping window, sign up right then and there with reps. That's the ultimate goal. So in terms of owned resources, as you can see, we've already begun with the website, which is going to be the main place to drive everybody. So that is the homepage of lpnl.com. If you click on that Read More box, it takes you to the retail competition page. That's going to be the homepage of our website, for the next 12 months, as it's been for the last 6. If you go to the retail competition page, you'll see we've already started splitting out in tabs. First page is a general explainer of what retail competition is. Second one is specifically for reps. We've utilized that a lot the last few months because there's a lot of information that we're needing to impart to the reps. And so as we participate in these different groups around the state, we're telling them, go to that retail providers page, and it'll have all of the information that you need as you start establishing your business. Information for customers. Right now, we're just starting to really populate that because we actually have information that we impart to them because we've gotten to a point where we have things that are set in stone versus kind of what we'd like to be doing. And then frequently asked questions, that'll be growing out as we go forward. We already have quite a few on there, but we'll start really hammering those as we get into the nitty-gritty of the next, 6 to 8 months as we go through this. This map's up on the website, which has been there for a while, but we've condensed it down a little bit, but it kind of tells people where we've been, but more importantly, where we're going. You can see that launching the customer education campaign is where we are right now. As we've launched that campaign the last few months, you can see that just the sheer amount of news stories that we participated in has gone up, and high watermark in August of 47 news stories. I don't think in the 9 years I've been here that we've ever had a month where we did 47 news stories or were mentioned at least in those. So you can see that there's a lot of attention on this story, and we're going to continue to try to get that out there. One thing that's hard when you start getting news stories is that after a while, you keep asking the news to do the story, and they say it's not really news if we do it every week. So we're trying to break this down and find different ways that it is newsworthy so we continue to get this out in front of people. Really quick, this is the kind of communications overview. For example, the opt-in vote, that all of these stages are done because that was leading up to the vote that y'all took in February 22 along with the council. So the next step of this is customer education about retail competition. Right now, we're in that kind of awareness and dispelling rumors stage of this, but we're also putting graphics out there, putting together messaging for the call center. We've got that microsite on our lpnl.com, and we're in the process of making 2 new animated videos that we'll put up there. All of those will be happening through the end of this year. Second part of this, We've got communication with specific segments, and so we're doing things like putting together letters that are going to go out to landlords. We're talking to community groups. We're putting together a guide for shopping, and so hopefully we'll have the first version of that out here pretty quick. We've been buying advertisement out there, radio, digital, and print for the last 6 months, and we'll continue through the end of this, again, to drive people back to the website. As we get into first and second quarter of 23, we're going to need to take a second and remind folks that we've got to cut over the remaining 30%. So we're going to do a mini version of what we did on the step one, where we're going to tell folks, hey, go to our website, look at this lookup tool, see how you're affected, when you're affected, what you can expect. And we'll do all this typical messaging around that as we get closer to Memorial Day. This one is not as impactful as the one previously, but we still don't want this to become an event that kind of gives us a black eye, so we need to get out there and let people know what we're doing on the cutover. But once we cut over, that then goes into quarters 2 and 3 of 2023, where we're really going to dig on how you shop for providers. That's where these open houses will come in, that we'll hold several of those. Hasn't been decided, but for example, you might imagine renting out the Civic Center on a Saturday and then telling all the reps that are registered in the market, come out, have a booth space, talk to your potential customers. We want to have a really interactive event as much as we can, because I think that's what's going to be most impactful, is that they get to talk directly to those folks that will be serving them after we go live. But as we're doing that to drive people to the open houses, again, the ad buys, the customer e-blast, media advisories, which is press releases, social posts, website updates. We'll go through all the standard fare leading into that, and that'll be a mini campaign. And then, once we get to quarter 3, at that point, it's going to be a go live to competition, and that's where we're going to utilize a lot of direct mailers to remind folks that if you've signed up for a provider, you should receive your bill with that new provider and your final bill from LP&L at X month, be it October, November, December. But then also, reminding them that if you are somebody who has not chosen a provider, here's the process that is going to be undertaken to, use a default provider and assign you one, and what that means for you and what your rights are after we go live. So it's going to be a constant campaign until we get to the end. And the key takeaways, as always, are going to be that we're going to try to reach as many customers as possible. And the goal is to manage expectations for the timeline and inform customers about what actions they need to take as we get closer to that shopping window, which is important. Up to this point, we've told them, hang tight, you don't need to do anything. But as we get into 2023 and get closer, we need to start telling them, this is how you look at providers, this is where you can start shopping, this is what you need to know as we get closer to this. Going to continue to use all of these different means of communications, and as always, I'm going to be repetitive and be saying the same things over and over and over and over again until everybody's just exhausted. But that's kind of what you have to do, because at the end of the day, as I always say, we're not going to reach every single customer. We're going to try, but you're not. But we want to keep focusing on what, why, and importantly, when, so we can hopefully mitigate confusion as we go through. And you're always going to have people that are circling back around, and so going to be working very closely with Clint and Jamie and the call center folks to make sure that as we hit these milestones, that all of the standard questions that I'm hearing out in the public, that they've got answers for those questions as people calling on the phones. And try to make this as easy as possible on them, so that if somebody calls in and just says, tell me what to do, they've got someplace that they can direct those customers. That shopping guide's going to be important, because even if they can't get to the website, we can print off copies and have them down here in the lobby and tell them, hey, come by and see us in the lobby, and we'll give you that information. So trying to hit everything we possibly can, but I would say in the next 6 months, you're going to see a stair step into more actionable communications versus just general awareness right now. But if y'all hear anything out there, let me know. If you have any speaking opportunities, certainly let me know, because I'm going to need as many of those as I can. Solomon, I appreciate you getting me in front of all of the folks that you've gotten me in front of. I think it's important. And for anybody else that has a group, doesn't matter if it's 5 people getting coffee on a Saturday, just let me know. I'll show up.
Mr. Fields?
Thank you.
Matt, I have a question. You may have addressed this in the past. When is the shut-off, so to speak, for budget building?
Right, so we're gonna start unwinding that as we get to the new year. We're working on a letter that's gonna be sent out to all those budget bill customers that's explaining what that process is. I know that they're also going through the process of identifying, we just went through the variance process, so they're trying to find the group of folks that are gonna be the most impacted so that maybe we can reach out to them directly, but everybody's gonna receive a letter, and we're gonna try to unwind that as we get into the new year. I don't know if we've got an exact date.
I was gonna say, do we have a settle up month?
I don't know that we've got. Yeah, we've already gotten to the point where we're not accepting any new. But in terms of those that are on it, I don't know that we've established. Ashley, have we?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are on that. But
Okay.
we've identified those customers, and we'll be getting letters out to them hopefully in the next month or so.
Okay, one other question. Do we have a operational position on payment arrangements? Because at some point, we have to mitigate our losses there too.
Yes, and we will begin to, as we get into the summer months, we will begin to have a keen focus on, we can't be setting these payment arrangements so that they go over the go-live date. Obviously, we've got to wind those back. I think working with folks to get them with community organizations like Neighborhood House is one way we're looking at trying to roll off some of the payment arrangement side of it, but get some of the longer-term assistance. Karen Murphy and Bill Howerton's group, Community Development, trying to utilize a lot of their funds as well. And we will still be able to utilize payment arrangements for the other services, just not for the electric portion. And that's important too, that City of Lubbock Utilities will still have that function and be performing, customer service and billing for those other 4 utilities, and we'll still be able to work with customers to pay arrange that. We've just got to get to a point where we're taking the electric portion of it out so that there's not continuing debt as we go live. So it's going to be fun and interesting, and as you well know, we'll be doing some of this stuff during the summer months, which is always pretty stressful. But trying to figure out a way to smooth this out and see if we can't work with community partners to get some additional assistance so that we can use that instead of necessarily just delaying their payment date.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Stafford?
Matt, in the presentations that you've given thus far, are you seeing any commonality or frequently asked questions or some confusion out there that you can kind of summarize for us?
I would say the number one is when I finish talking with groups, they'll say, this is very, very interesting, but we think we'll just stay with LP&L. That's the number one. And that's where everything that we're putting out in writing, everything on the way, is trying to drive home this, we're not going to be an option. We'll give you as much information as we can and help you through this process, but you're going to have to pick a new provider. That's the number one. Number two, typically, it's folks pointing back to Winter Storm Uri. And it's folks confusing that small set of variable rate customers that receive very high bills during that week versus just the vast majority of residential and small businesses that were on a set rate of some form. So it's a combination of, the first and the uncertainty of Winter Storm Uri. That still continues to drive a lot of the conversations I'm having with groups. But as we get closer, it'll probably transform, and that second one will be, who should I choose? And if you can't tell me, how do I decide how to choose? That's going to quickly become the number two question, I think.
Any other questions or comments? Only comment I have is, and all of y'all will be like, yeah, idiot, we already thought of that. But we've got, top 100 customers or whatever it is. City's going to be one of those. Texas Tech. I don't know. Y'all have a list of our top 200 customers. Going to Texas Tech, doing a presentation with them, not only are they going to be a customer in this, but all their individuals, rather than trying to hit every 5 individuals or coffee with Mr. Rose or whatever that may be, going to those top 100 customers and hitting their 75 employees or 3,000 employees, whatever they may have, and us doing a presentation there, because they're going to capture it. They're going to be needing that as well. And if you guys can go directly to those top, I don't know, maybe it's 500, whatever it is, I don't know what that number is, and sit down with those folks. It's like if you came to my place of employment, we'd have 70 people that would be right there. Some of them may be on South Plains because where they live, but for the majority of those folks, you're going to be able to hit a bigger swath than just direct mailers, this media stuff that we're trying to capture and miss out on. But, because that's going to hit home more so from the company CEO there saying, hey, we're having to go through this. You all need to listen up because you're going to be doing this individually.
Now, I think that's a good thought, and I know that just like Steve Moon in my shop obviously has, list of kind of the larger entities that he works with on the reliability side, but I think that we certainly are going to have that information, and I think that'd be a good tool to kind of go down as we get into the new year. To your
The
point,
city
of
of Lubbock
saying,
employs how many folks?
City of Lubbock.
Yep. How many?
3,000.
3,000. There's 3,000
Over
folks right there. Maybe
3,000.
only
Yeah.
70% of those are on Lubbock Power and Light, but regardless, there's a group right there of the masses.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea. And as you know, as we get to December, January, February, those are typically kind of quiet months for us. And so I think that'd be a good idea, being proactive and maybe going down that list and finding larger groups within our larger customers that we can go talk to. They
Because
can make
we're
an
all going to be a
announcement.
customer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good idea,
So
for sure.
that's my, any other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Henry. Far right button.
I probably should know this, but will the billing be separate from the Lubbock Utilities bill now?
Yes, ma'am. And
So
that's
that should
that's a good
unconfuse.
that's a really good point to bring up because, for example, KCBD did a series of stories, and one of the viewers sent questions into KCBD, and so they did a follow-up with some of the materials that they got from me in my first sit-down with them, and did a follow-on story answering those questions, because I'd sat down and said, I'm going to give you a bunch of information to use. And that was one of the questions, where's my bill going to come from? And so that's going to be a lot of what we're going to have to drive home, is that once you make that choice, like in the shopping window in the summer months, starting whenever that cutover date is, your electricity is going to come from company XYZ that you pick. But your City of Lubbock utilities bill is still going to arrive with your water, wastewater, stormwater, solid waste. And theoretically, we're going to be, just a line item on that bill that you get from that new electric provider. But as we've talked about before, folks need to know where their bill's coming from. They need to know where our costs are, because we also want them to know that while we're falling off as a retail provider, we're still here operating. We're delivering the power that you choose to your home. There's a cost associated with that. That cost is going to be right in line with, Encore and other folks that perform that service. But we don't want folks to think that we're somehow hanging on the bill and tacking erroneous charges onto their new provider. We need to make sure that they know the structure, that, basically the PCRF that we used to purchase your power and deliver it, you're now purchasing that from your new provider, and we're just delivering it, but that delivery function still have that cost to it that's built into your rate. And so that'll be a big part of, the information we put out there, and it's already part of what I've started to drive home when I talk to these groups, because that's going to be confusing for folks that haven't been paying attention to this.
And I think, Ms. Henry, that's where it comes to. Matt, we appreciate all that. We understand everything you're saying. We'll just stay with Lubbock Power and Light.
Exactly.
I don't need the extra bills or anything else. Yeah, it was just, so good luck.
Yeah.
I just think the
But no,
most
very-
y'all can get out there, it's, yeah.
A
that's,
very, very good point, and one that I've already started seeing come up a lot as I've talked to groups. So,
Okay.
thank y'all.
Well, from board members, if y'all do have any folks we can get them in front of, and anything else, contact Matt, and we'll try to get them out in front of the masses. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Stafford.
Matt, one thing you might want to think about, as Jane pointed out, they're going to be getting a new bill, and whether it's October, November, whatever that is, from company XYZ, but they're still going to be getting the bill for the other.
Right.
I think we need to work with the city to either rename it City Services and make the bill look different than it was, so they'll know it's water and stormwater. Because if they all want to stay with LP&L and they choose someone and you've got the very same symbol and name, they're going to think they're getting double billed. Just a thought
Okay.
out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item 11, no other items under 10 there, I believe.
We're on consent.
Oh, we're all the way to consent, so you got me out of order when we jumped to 8 and 9, and,
Yeah, see, that confused myself.
all right. Yeah, y'all want to go back over 11 and 12, anyone? Okay, all right, we'll jump back to 1 then. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda items 13 through 17. If anyone has any questions on those or anything, if not, I would entertain a
I'd
motion.
like to have number 13 voted on separately, please.
All right, we will, do we need a motion in a second to pull that off, or just? Nope, okay. Then we'll go ahead, and if there's no other items, we will entertain items 14 through 17 on the consent agenda. Have a motion by Mr. Schultz, a second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor do so, or any discussion? All those in favor do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same. That one carries. That'll bring us to item 13. And I'm not sure, that item 13 is to consider resolution rejecting proposals received from RFP 7188-22-ELD for Erskine to Brandon feeder upgrade construction services. Proposal received exceeded engineer's estimated cost/budget, and staff will reevaluate this project. Mr. Orta.
Yes, ma'am.
Felix, my question is, we know costs are not going down.
Correct.
And so to pull this because it's over budget, will it always be always over budget, or are things going to come down, or help me on the
That part, I
thinking?
don't know. We did have two proposals come in on this one. One of them we had to deem non-responsive because they didn't turn in their proposal bond that was required for this. The other one, the estimated for this project was $450,000 was the engineer's estimate for this project. The other bid that did come in was over $1 million. So very significant. With everything going on, contractors, everyone, materials, there's no telling, there's no way to see if there's going to be costs going to continue to stay up or not. But staff is going to go back and look at it to see if, do we go back out for bid, try again, or do we try to do this in-house, or to see what else can be done, so.
Question, is this a project that needs to be done, though?
Yes, but it's not critical to 2023.
Okay, but.
The answer
it
was
needs
yes,
to be
but it's not
accomplished.
critical to 2023.
It's not one of the critical ones for the 30%.
Are you good? Okay. Any other questions or comments on item 13? If not, I'll entertain a motion to have that reevaluated. Well, didn't it say reevaluate, isn't that what it?
Reject.
To reject, not
Reject.
reevaluate, sorry. Wrong I'll reject that, or I'll reevaluate that with a rejection. All right, I need a motion for that. Got a motion by Mr. Schultz, need a second. Got a second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same. That one carries. All right, that brings us to item 18, I believe. Adjourned. Thank you all.